Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
My mom's text said, "He's getting evicted." My reply? Just 2 words. And it shut her up for good. You ever feel a moment so damn satisfying, so sharp and sweet in its finality, that it almost tastes like revenge in the back of your throat? That was me, standing in the middle of my kitchen, phone in one hand, coffee in the other, staring at that message from my mother like it was the punchline of a joke I'd heard 100 times but never really laughed at until now. "He's getting evicted," she wrote, like it was my responsibility to stop it, like it wasn't the natural consequence of a man who had been coddled and babied for nearly 4 decades. I didn't even blink. I just typed 2 words and hit send. I'll tell you those words later, but first, let me tell you how we got here, because this wasn't some sudden breakdown. It was a slow erosion, a lifelong drip of guilt and obligation disguised as family love. Growing up, I learned early that fairness wasn't a concept our family ever truly understood. I was the older one, by 3 years, and from the moment my brother Josh came into the world, it was like the family's emotional compass reset itself entirely to point in his direction. He was the sensitive one, the creative soul, the free spirit who just needed more understanding, more space, more time, more everything. Me? I was reliable. That was the word they used for me, like it was a compliment. But let me tell you, being called reliable is just code for, "We're going to pile responsibilities on you until you break, and then we'll act shocked when you finally scream." My mom had a favorite phrase she trotted out every time I asked why things always felt so damn lopsided. "Josh needs more help than you," she'd say, like it was a scientific fact, like his incompetence was a chronic illness we were all duty-bound to accommodate. Never mind the fact that I was juggling school, a part-time job, and house chores by the time I was 15. Never mind that I kept my grades up while Josh barely scraped by, and when he failed math twice, it was somehow my fault for not tutoring him enough. He could charm the skin off a snake when he wanted to. Teachers would excuse his behavior because he had such potential. Neighbors adored him for his wit and that slouchy kind of cool he wore like an old hoodie. My parents, God, they were his biggest fans. Even when he got caught shoplifting in high school, they spun it like he was rebelling against the system, like it was some romantic act of defiance instead of just petty theft. Meanwhile, if I came home 5 minutes late from a shift at the diner, I got the cold shoulder and a lecture about responsibility. By the time we were both in our 20s, the pattern had calcified into something ugly and permanent. Josh bounced between temp jobs and artistic pursuits, which was just a fancy way of saying he sat in coffee shops all day doodling on napkins and pretending to be misunderstood. I was working 60-hour weeks, paying off my student loans, and trying to build a life that didn't include weekly guilt trips from my mother. But still, they leaned on me like I was some sort of backup generator for Josh's failures. It started small, like all traps do. A little help with his car insurance. A few groceries here and there. Then it became utility bills, credit card debt, and eventually rent. At first, I told myself I was just helping him through a rough patch. That's what Mom said. Anyway, just until he finds something stable. Funny thing is, nobody ever stopped to ask why he never did. Every time I questioned it, I was met with the same condescending tone, that syrupy maternal guilt that coated every word. "Emily, you've always been stronger. He just needs a little more help." More help, more money, more patience, more of me. It became an open wound that never healed, just kept festering while they slapped on band-aids made of excuses. I started paying his rent regularly when he was 27. He's 35 now. Do the math. 8 damn years of covering someone else's roof while I sacrificed vacations, skipped birthday dinners, and wore shoes with worn soles just to make it work. And he didn't even thank me, not once. Not really. Maybe a "you're a lifesaver" text here or there, but that was it. No acknowledgement of the weight I carried. No understanding of the burnout chewing through my spine like termites in old wood. Just assumptions. Entitlement. Silence. The worst part? I didn't even realize how bad it had gotten until one day I sat down and added up the numbers. I nearly choked on my wine when I saw the total. I could have put a down payment on a house. I could have paid off my car. I could have. I don't know, lived. But instead, I'd been pouring my life into a bottomless pit of someone else's problems, someone else's comfort. And for what? So my parents wouldn't call me selfish? So my brother could keep playing Peter Pan while I aged 10 years in exhaustion? I didn't realize I was funding his lifestyle more than helping his survival. But once that realization hit, it changed everything. And you better believe it was only the beginning. There's a strange kind of numbness that settles in when a bad habit becomes routine, when something that should feel outrageous starts to feel ordinary. That's exactly how it felt every time I logged into my bank account and saw that monthly transfer heading toward Josh's landlord, like brushing my teeth, like taking out the trash, like clockwork. It wasn't even a debate anymore. Year 5 had rolled in without so much as a thank you card or a damn phone call, just another month, another payment, another piece of me handed over without ceremony. And that's the part that really starts to gnaw at you. Not just the money itself, though God knows it was enough to make anyone sick, but the complete and utter expectation of it, the way it became woven into the background noise of my life. Unnoticed by everyone except me. I remember sitting at my kitchen table that January morning, watching the snow pile up outside, a lukewarm cup of coffee in my hand, and that same aching thought in my chest. How the hell did I let this become normal? It wasn't just about Josh anymore, it was about how much I'd given up along the way. I'd skipped vacations because I couldn't afford them right now, even though my salary said otherwise. I'd passed on weekend getaways with friends, postponed replacing my cracked phone screen, maxed out my credit card more than once, not because I was irresponsible, but because I was too responsible for someone else. And the kicker? Nobody seemed to notice. Nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody questioned how much it took for me just to keep his life glued together. Be honest, have you ever been made to feel guilty just for being functional? Like your success is a problem in someone else's eyes? Like your ability to hold your own becomes a reason for everyone else to dump their chaos into your lap? That's what it felt like. Like I wasn't allowed to complain, wasn't allowed to feel tired, because I was the together one. I could handle it, right? I always did. That's what they thought. That's what they needed me to be. I remember one particular evening when I looked at my bank statement and started mentally tallying the numbers, not just this month's rent, but all of it. Every transfer, every bill, just until he gets back on his feet, contribution. I pulled out an old notebook and started writing it all down, line by painful line. It felt like counting scars. 500 here, 700 there, a couple thousand during that stretch when he lost his job again. The total hit me like a punch to the stomach. It was more than I made in a year when I first started working. It was more than my emergency savings. It was obscene, and it was mine, and it was gone. The next week, I hesitated before making the transfer. My finger hovered over the confirm button for longer than usual. I stared at the screen like it might answer back, like it might blink and tell me, you don't have to do this. But I did it anyway, because that's what I'd been trained to do: comply, sacrifice, keep the peace. Later that day, my mother called. Not to ask how I was doing, not to say thank you for helping Josh yet again, but to remind me that your brother's been really stressed lately, and he's trying so hard. Emily. When I finally cracked and said I was thinking about stopping the rent support, she didn't miss a beat. Her voice hardened, clipped and sharp, the way it always did when I stepped out of line. I can't believe you'd be so ungrateful, she said, as if gratitude was supposed to flow backward, as if Josh was the one making the sacrifice here. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. But that was the moment something shifted in me, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, internal click like a deadbolt turning. I stopped telling myself stories about why he needed help. I stopped pretending that I didn't resent every single dime. And somewhere deep down, I started preparing for the day I'd stop for good. That day came sooner than I expected. It was a Thursday afternoon, gray skies and freezing wind, the kind of day that already feels like a warning. I had to drop off something at Josh's apartment, some mail that still got sent to my address, another bit of housekeeping I'd never been thanked for. He wasn't home, so I used the spare key. I stepped inside, already irritated, already rehearsing the speech I'd give him later about updating his damn address. But then I saw it, sitting there in the corner of the room, half hidden under a throw blanket, like it wasn't worth hiding properly. My feet froze mid-step. My brain tried to rationalize it, but the truth was already sinking in, heavy and cold and bitter. It wasn't just a one-time thing. It wasn't just a bad month. It was something else entirely. And that was the moment I knew this wasn't help. This wasn't family. This was betrayal. And what I found in his apartment changed everything. The strange thing about betrayal is that it rarely screams in your face. It whispers from corners you never thought to check, from small details you've been trained to ignore, from places like the edge of a coffee table or, in my case, under a damn couch cushion that never should have held any secrets in the first place. I wasn't looking for anything when I walked into Josh's apartment that day. I wasn't there to snoop or uncover some grand deception. I was just there to drop off a stupid stack of mail and get out before the smell of stale beer and takeout containers clung to my coat. But the universe has a way of throwing you the truth when you're finally ready to stop pretending you don't already know it. It was the kind of place that wore its neglect like wallpaper, dirty dishes, wrinkled clothes tossed across chairs, pizza boxes stacked like some sad architectural project. I'd seen it all before, and none of it surprised me anymore. But then, as I bent down to pick up a credit card statement that had slipped from the pile, I saw something tucked halfway under the couch, a glossy white box, pristine and unopened, with a logo that didn't belong in this kind of mess. I pulled it out slowly, fingers shaking slightly, not from fear but from the dull certainty blooming in my gut. It was a brand new gaming console, one of those expensive limited edition ones that people camp outside stores to get their hands on. The price tag practically screamed at me from the corner of the box. I sat there for a moment, holding it in my lap, feeling the weight of it settle into my chest like a brick. My hands moved on their own, searching under the couch cushions, digging through the clutter like some part of me already knew there'd be more. And there was. Designer sneakers still in their boxes, unopened tech gadgets, a stack of sealed packages with shipping labels dated just a few days earlier. It was like opening a portal to a life I didn't know he was living, a second layer beneath all the chaos, one where he was thriving while I was budgeting groceries and canceling weekend plans just to keep him housed. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the evidence of his double life. Long enough for the light outside to shift, for the room to grow colder, for my blood to start boiling in that slow, steady way that feels more dangerous than an explosion. He hadn't just been lying. He'd been celebrating my sacrifice, turning my hard-earned money into toys and luxuries while selling the narrative of struggle and hardship to anyone who would listen. He was conning all of us, but mostly me. When he walked in an hour later, casually tossing his keys on the counter and muttering something about traffic, he didn't even notice the box in my hands at first. He saw the look on my face before anything else and froze mid-step. "Where'd you find that?" he asked, trying to sound nonchalant, like I'd stumbled onto a grocery receipt instead of $1,000 console. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at him, letting the silence stretch until it turned into a weapon. "I bought it on sale," he finally muttered, shrugging like the whole thing was a misunderstanding. "It's not what you think." "Really?" I asked, my voice low and calm, the kind of calm that comes just before a storm. "Because what I think is that while I've been scraping by to cover your rent, you've been collecting expensive bullshit and pretending you're broke." His reaction wasn't shame. It wasn't regret. It was annoyance, pure, unfiltered irritation that I dared question the narrative he'd worked so hard to spin. "You're overreacting," he said with a roll of his eyes. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. God, you always get like this when you don't understand how hard it is for me." I almost laughed. The absurdity of it, the sheer gall, was so thick it was choking me. But I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. I just stood up, walked past him without a word, and let the door slam behind me. Later that night, I got the inevitable call from my mother. Of course he had gone crying to her. Of course she was ready with her script. "He's just going through a phase," she said, as if that explained the sneakers, the gadgets, the unapologetic entitlement in his voice. Don't be so harsh. He's always been different. I didn't argue. I didn't try to explain. I just nodded into the phone, muttered something generic, and made a silent decision. I wouldn't tell them yet. I wouldn't warn them. I wouldn't announce it like some dramatic rebellion. I would simply stop paying next month. No explanations. No justifications. Just silence. Let them figure it out when the rent went unpaid. Let them feel the same kind of surprise that had hit me like a slap to the face. I didn't owe anyone an explanation anymore. I'd spent too many years justifying my exhaustion, my dwindling bank balance, my slow crawl toward burnout. And what happened next was pure chaos, and I didn't lift a finger to stop it. There's a certain quiet satisfaction that comes with withholding the one thing someone has always assumed you would hand over without question. It's not revenge in the traditional sense, not loud or violent or dripping with dramatics, but something slower, colder, and far more powerful. It's the slow turning key in the lock, the soft click of detachment, the final breath you take before stepping away from something that never deserved you in the first place. That was the feeling I carried with me as the first of the month rolled around, and I did nothing. I didn't transfer the money. I didn't check in with Josh. I didn't make a single call or send a single message. I simply let the day pass like it was any other, except this time, I wasn't his safety net anymore. The strange part was how quickly my body noticed the change before my mind fully processed it. My shoulders felt lighter. My breathing felt easier. I slept through the night without waking up to the throb of anxiety behind my eyes. It was like my entire nervous system had been waiting for permission to let go of a burden it never agreed to carry. I didn't even feel guilty. Not really. I expected to. I'd braced for that familiar pang of shame that always followed any act of defiance. But instead, there was nothing but a deep, steady calm that settled in my bones like a long overdue exhale. Josh didn't know yet. That was the best part. He had no idea the ground beneath his feet had shifted. He was still walking through life like everything would be handled for him, like his rent would magically disappear from his list of worries because his older sister would take care of it, like she always did. I imagined him waking up that morning, stretching in bed, sipping coffee, turning on his new gaming console without a thought in the world, while the clock ticked down toward the moment when the rent came due and nothing arrived. The first sign of chaos came 2 days later when my phone buzzed mid-afternoon. I was at work, halfway through a spreadsheet, when I saw the name flash across my screen, Josh's landlord. I let it ring. Then it rang again. And again. I turned the phone face down and went back to my work with a calmness that felt almost surreal. The next day, the calls slowed but didn't stop. Then, as expected, came the text from Josh. It was short, clipped, irritated rather than panicked. Hey, rent didn't go through. Can you check it? I didn't reply. A few hours later, a longer message followed. Landlord saying I'm late. Can you send it again? Maybe there was a glitch. Still no panic, just inconvenience. He hadn't connected the dots yet. He was so accustomed to me fixing everything that it didn't even occur to him that maybe I'd chosen not to. I went out for coffee that evening, a small act of rebellion wrapped in normalcy. I sat by the window with a book I hadn't touched in months and let myself exist without being anyone's lifeline. While I sipped my latte, another message came through, this time from Mom. What's going on? Why didn't you pay it? That was all it said. Not a greeting. Not a question of how I was. Just straight to the point, straight to the expectation, straight to the assumption that I'd slipped up, that I was the one who had failed. I stared at that message for a long time, then slipped my phone back into my coat pocket and returned to my book. Let them squirm. Let them wonder. I owed no one an explanation anymore. Let Josh explain to her. Let him scramble. That night, just after 10, my phone lit up again. It was Mom again, and this time the message came in 2 frantic bursts, like she could barely type fast enough to get the urgency across. He's being evicted, the first one said, the exclamation marks practically bleeding off the screen. Then, a second message followed right after, you need to help him now. That was the moment I knew they'd finally hit the wall. The curtain had dropped. The illusion had shattered. and none of them had a damn clue what to do without me. That was the moment I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even bitter. I was just done. Done cleaning up messes. Done softening the blow. Done pretending this was about love when it had always been about control. So I picked up my phone, opened the message thread with my mother, and typed 2 simple words. 2 words that had been sitting on the tip of my tongue for years, waiting for their moment. 2 words that weren't cruel, weren't loud, weren't even particularly emotional. That's when I sent the 2 words that ended everything. I stared at the screen for a moment longer, letting my finger hover just above the send button, not because I was uncertain, not because I second-guessed my decision, but because I wanted to savor the moment before everything changed. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing damn well you're about to jump, but this time without fear, just a strange, exhilarating sense of freedom humming under your skin. Then, without ceremony or hesitation, I tapped send. 2 words. That's all it took. 2 words that had lived unspoken inside me for years, buried beneath obligation, guilt, and carefully disguised resentment. Not anymore. It was oddly anticlimactic at first, just a soft swoosh sound, the quiet confirmation that my message had been delivered into the same digital void where so many of my boundaries had gone to die. I waited, not for a reply, but just to feel something: regret, fear, relief, maybe even dread. But what I felt instead was peace. Deep, steady, uncluttered peace. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but earned. The kind that wraps around your shoulders like a warm coat after years of standing in the cold. I turned off my phone and went to bed early that night. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I fell asleep without a headache curling behind my eyes, without a tightness in my chest, without the usual sense that I was bracing for the next emotional punch. The world didn't end. The sky didn't fall. No one stormed through my door with accusations and demands. There was just silence. And it was beautiful. But silence in my family never lasted long. By the 3rd day, I knew something was brewing when I checked my messages and saw the family group chat had exploded into a digital war zone. The group, previously a sleepy thread filled with birthday wishes and forwarded memes, had turned into a swirling pit of passive-aggressive outrage and thinly veiled attacks. My mother didn't respond to me directly, of course. That would have required the grace to confront me head-on. Instead, she posted vague little grenades like, "Some people forget what family means when it's inconvenient," and "Sad how those you love most turn coldest when you need them." Then came my sister-in-law, Josh's girlfriend, who'd always pretended to be sweet and neutral, but now took off the mask completely. Maybe if some people didn't enjoy watching others suffer, this family wouldn't be falling apart. That one was clearly for me, no matter how much she tried to veil it. Even my cousins chimed in, throwing in their unsolicited opinions like I had personally declared war on kindness itself. I became the villain overnight, the cold-hearted, selfish, ungrateful daughter who dared to walk away from her brother's endless pit of need. And you know what? I didn't care. Not even a little. If anything, their fury confirmed what I already suspected, that they didn't see me as a person with limits or needs or feelings. I had been a resource, a backup plan, a human ATM dressed up as a daughter. But once I stopped functioning in that role, they didn't try to understand, they just punished me for it. But while their messages poured in like a swarm of hornets, something remarkable was happening inside my own life. I was getting better. I was sleeping full nights, waking up with energy, laughing more. The tension that had lived permanently in my jaw and shoulders began to fade. I found myself enjoying small things again, a walk in the park, a quiet dinner, the feeling of not being pulled in 17 directions at once. Even my body noticed. My migraines, which had become so common I'd stopped keeping track, started to disappear. My appetite came back. My skin looked better. I was healing, not in some dramatic, movie-worthy way, but in small, quiet ways that felt more honest and lasting. I was learning how to be a person again, not just a function for someone else's survival. Then, just as I was beginning to settle into that strange, calm version of my life, the phone rang again. I saw the name flash across the screen and nearly dropped the cup of tea in my hand. My dad. I hadn't spoken to him in weeks. He usually stayed out of the mess, choosing instead to float around the edges of conflict like a ghost who didn't want to be caught in the crossfire. But this time, he called. No texts, no middleman, just a direct call. I picked up out of curiosity more than anything else, bracing myself for another lecture, another guilt trip, another plea for me to just be the bigger person. But that's not what happened. His voice was quiet, hesitant at first, like he wasn't sure he had the right to be saying the things he was about to say. I just wanted to tell you, he said, pausing awkwardly. I get it. I really do. I've been watching this for years, and I know you've done more than your share. I nearly dropped the phone again. I didn't expect him to pick a side, let alone mine. Your mother means well, he added, like he was contractually obligated to say it, but she's blinded by Josh. Always has been. I didn't say much. I didn't know what to say. It felt surreal, hearing validation from the one person I thought would remain permanently neutral, detached, forever hiding behind a newspaper while the storm raged on. But I appreciated it more than I could explain. It didn't change the past, but it softened something in me, something sharp that had been cutting for years. And just as I began to believe maybe things were finally leveling out, just as I started to entertain the idea that peace might stick around for a while, another message came through. One line. One sentence. And that's when everything shifted again, because the message that followed made my blood run cold. It arrived in the middle of an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday, the kind of day you don't expect to become a turning point, the kind of day that slips by unnoticed until something slams into it like a brick through glass. I had just gotten home from work, shoes kicked off by the door, dinner simmering gently on the stove, when my phone buzzed against the kitchen counter. I glanced down, assuming it would be another meaningless notification, maybe an email or a weather alert, but instead, there it was, a message from Josh. After all the silence, all the shouting, all the family implosions, and the carefully curated distance I had put between us, there it was. A single sentence, without greeting or punctuation, like it had been typed in a hurry or out of spite. You never really knew what was going on. I stared at those words for longer than I should have, not because I didn't understand them, but because I couldn't decide if they were a warning, a confession, or just another manipulation wrapped in a vague riddle. My first instinct was to dismiss it entirely, just another way for him to claw back control, to make me doubt myself again, to stir the ashes of guilt that I had finally begun to sweep away. But something about the message burrowed into my thoughts, slow and persistent, like a thorn you don't notice until it's already under your skin. For the rest of the night, I couldn't shake it. His words played on a loop in the back of my mind, dragging up memories I'd long ago filed away as irrelevant or harmless, odd little moments that, on their own, never meant much, but now seemed to pulse with a strange new energy. I remembered the time he showed up at my place in the middle of the night, eyes glassy and nervous, claiming he'd been followed, but refusing to say by who. I remembered him once mentioning a storage unit he never let anyone see, brushing it off like a joke, but looking too serious for it to be one. I remembered the phone calls he used to take in the hallway, speaking too softly for me to hear, always ending them with the same sentence. No, she doesn't know anything. At the time, I'd assumed he meant Mom. That he was keeping secrets from her, playing some kind of juvenile game of defiance or self-protection. But now, staring at that message, I began to wonder if he'd meant me. If I had been the one he was keeping in the dark all along. And if so, why? The next morning, I called the landlord. I told myself it was just to confirm the eviction had gone through, that I wasn't being pulled back into anything, that I just needed closure. But part of me was already digging, already peeling back layers I didn't want to admit existed. The landlord was polite but curt, confirming that Josh had left the property 2 days after the final notice, leaving behind a mess and an unpaid bill. But then, almost as an afterthought, he added something that stopped me cold. The police were there when he left, he said casually, like it was normal. Had some kind of situation. Didn't ask questions, not my business. I thanked him and hung up, heart pounding now in a way that didn't feel like anxiety anymore, it felt like dread. I tried calling Josh's number, Not because I wanted to speak to him, but because I needed to hear his voice to make this all feel real. But it rang and rang, then went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. What would I even say? I tried texting. No reply. The next day, another message came through, but this one wasn't from Josh. It was from an unknown number, no name, no context, no words, just a photo. It loaded slowly, the image buffering inch by inch, until it finally came into full view. My stomach twisted. It was him. Josh, sitting in a hospital bed, pale and hollow-eyed, wearing one of those open-backed gowns with tubes taped to his arms. He looked gaunt, like he'd aged a decade in a week, and for a moment I felt a flicker of something close to pity. But then I saw the background. What little of it was visible, and I realized this wasn't a hospital room. This was a facility. The kind with locked doors and observation windows. Something wasn't right. There was no caption, no timestamp, no explanation at all. Just that one image, as if to say everything and nothing at the same time. I tried calling the number. It didn't connect. I stared at the photo for what felt like hours, trying to make sense of the message, the silence, the story I clearly hadn't known I was living in. Had he been hiding something more than laziness and entitlement? Was it drugs? Debt? Something criminal? Or something darker, something worse that I'd never even considered? The questions came faster than the answers, tumbling over each other in a mess of panic and speculation. I thought I had known my brother, thought I'd just been enabling a man-child with no direction. But now I wasn't so sure. Now I wasn't sure of anything. That night, I sat alone in the dim light of my living room, the photos still open on my phone, the air heavy with all the things I'd never asked and he'd never said. And in the quiet that followed, I whispered the only truth I could hold on to. Maybe I wasn't the cruel one after all. Maybe I was lucky to get out when I did.